Allie. Join me as I show you how to make a mommy and me little bracelet set. This is out of pink pearls that my daughter picked out, as well as some crystals. If you need any supplies, go ahead and look below the video. In the description, we'll put links there for you to get all of your supplies. Gather up your materials and let's get started. For this bracelet, I'm using a very simple technique, and I'm going to be using a larger size for my bracelet, and then I use a smaller size for Mimi's for my daughter's bracelet here. We're going to do the exact same pattern. I'm going to show you in the bigger because it's easier to see. And you can see we have a little charm here, and then I love this infinite knot clasp here from Clasp Garden that we'll be using to put the clasp on. I like it also for her because that way it's a nice secure clasp with a nice little pinch there. She can get it on and off herself, but I think it's nice that it can be used for adults or children. So the first thing we do is we have a stop bead on some size 8 dragon thread, and I'm using the white color since I have a 4mm bicone and a 6mm pearl. In the smaller version, I have a 2mm bicone and a 4mm pearl that we'll be using. So basically same exact pattern, just downsizing a little bit. The first thing we're going to do is put on one of our 4mm bicones along with a 15-0, a pearl of 15-0, and another 4mm bicone. Letting that all drop down next to that stop bead, which I have about 4 feet of thread, and I have a good 10 inches before, so we can come back and put on the clasp. I'm going to now reverse the thread. So I'm going to pick up a 15, go back through the pearl here, let that pearl kind of lie straight as you can, pushing that 15-0 down. If you want to, you can also switch out the 15s for an 11. Grab another 15-0 seed bead, and we're going to sew through that first bicone in the opposite direction. So you're starting at the stop bead there and sewing over towards the other 15. Again, that kind of pulls it back. And see how this one is now sitting on the side? We're going to correct the other one to get that to sit on the side as well too. So bringing the camera in a little bit closer here, we have our bicone with the 15 sitting on either side of our 6mm pearl. From here, I'm going to pick up a 15 crystal, 15 crystal, 15. I'm going to sew from one pearl over to the pearl on the opposite side and sew through that one as well. See how that forms almost like a little nest around? Same thing here. 15, 4mm, 15, 4mm, 15. Once those two bicones are on with the 15s before and after, you're going to sew back through that first 4mm bicone that your thread was coming out of. Give a nice tight pull, and that completes that first little floral circle. So here it is in the 6mm. Here it is with the 4 and the 2mm there, the little tiny one. All right, from here, we're going to go to the opposite side. So there's two ways to do this. You can either go through the 15, pearl 15, and the 4mm bead there, or you can take your thread and needle along the side of the 15s and the 4mm bicones here to the opposite side, and make sure, just like right angle weave, that you're coming out basically the rightmost bead. So I'm coming out the bead that's opposite of that stop bead there with the 4mm. From here, I'm going to add a 15 6mm pearl, 15 4mm bead, 15 6mm pearl, and a 15. So back into the bicone that your thread is currently coming out of from the opposite side. So my thread's coming out here along the top of that rightmost bead. I'm going to sew into the bottom after adding those beads on, and that creates a little right angle weave unit. From here, sew through the 15 pearl at the top, sew through the 15 bicone on the right hand side, and exit. Once you have that, it's on to our next flower. So the next flower is going to start out the same. 15 and your pearl, 15 and a bicone. Turning it back the opposite way, add another 15, sew back down through the pearl, add a 15, sew into the opposite side of the bicone, from where your thread was originally coming out when you added the 15 in the pearl. Push those 15s down next to the pearl, and now we add our floral around. And you can change this up and add more pearls along the outside. You can add some check glass. It really is kind of infinite, the amount of different things you can do to this pattern. Go in and add your 2 bicones along with 15s before and after. Go through the opposite side bicone that you just added on the opposite side of the pearl. Repeat 15 bicone, 15 bicone, 15, and into the 4 millimeter that sits from the initial connection point there. From here, one more time, we'll go in and create a right angle weave unit. So I'm going to go through the side here. Make sure to pull my thread nice and tight so I don't have any extra thread showing. The pearl will pop up just a tiny little bit to the top. We want that. Out the pearl, and now we do our connection point with the pearls and the bicones on the side. If you want to, you can also just repeat and start your pearls right over again. I went back and forth whether or not to do this repeated section or whether or not to add in the right angle weave, and I ended up liking that right angle weave. So again, that is just a pearl with a 15 before and after, bicone, making sure we're separating these all by the 15, pearl, 15, and then once you have those 3 beads on with the 15 before and after, we're sewing back up into that 4 millimeter bead there. And then, like all good right angle weave, we're going to sew over, whether or not you're coming out the top or the bottom, doesn't really matter. We're going to come down through the 15, and always with right angle weave, you're going to exit on the right side of the bead. Back then into creating your next little floral pearl to create this beautiful, cute little mommy and me design. Once you have the piece finished, just like I did on the smaller version here, you're going to come out of one of your bicone beads, whether or not you're on the flower or whether or not you end on the right angle weave. And we're going to add 2 of our 15-O's along with 1 of the pearls. If you don't want it to be this big, certainly you can use your smaller pearls. That's up to you. I'm going through the clasp garden clasp, back down through the pearl, and then after that, repeating that group of 2 beads. I'm going to make sure I have 3 strands of thread going through and looping around that clasp. You can also use a wire guard if you want to, but here we have that going back up through here, reinforcing, going up through the end. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, but what I am going to do before the seed beads in between them is add my little charm here. So that way the charm is sitting right next to and right near the clasp. So we have that matching little heart charm. Coming out of the pearl, make sure that you're going up through the clasp and then back down through the pearl again. That way you're looping over. Do that 1, 2, 3 times. And then on the 3rd time through, coming back through those beads, what I want you to do is get ready to knot your thread end. So it can be hard sometimes when you think, oh, how am I getting rid of this thread end? I'm going back through the bicone, back through the beads along the side here. And once I'm back along the side here and through these beads and out, I'm going to go through this center bead here, give a nice tight pull, and then what I'm going to do is tie it off. So I'm going to sew underneath what's called a bridge thread, which is a thread that's connecting one bead to the other. I'm going to make a loop that's underneath there, not going through any beads, just sewing underneath that thread. Sew through the loop once, sew through that same loop twice. What that's going to do is what's called a sewer's knot. It does a nice little secure knot. You pull nice and tight down on the thread. You can see that tension and it knots it right there. I'm going to take that thread end then. We're going to do the same thing on the opposite side too. Take that thread end through the bead to get it away from the knot. That kind of pulls the knot even in the bead generally. Grab your thread zap or your thread burner here. Heat up the end, go into your thread, burn that down. And then just make sure as you're burning down that you don't go into the pearl because you can burn that luster on it. There you go. And now I'm just going to flip over and do the same thing on the opposite side to attach my clasp. So that way I have the matching versions here of that mommy and me bracelet. At the end here, I have the pearl back on, my little charm. I've done my knot and I'm just going in now and burning down my thread edge. And now I have that matching little version of the heart clasp and charm on that nice infinite clasp of Clasp Garden, where we have the same exact bracelet, my daughter and I now, a smaller version for a 6-year-old and a bigger version for her 40-year-old mom. Thanks so much for joining me in creating this mommy and me bracelet. I can't wait to hand it off to Mimi. I know she's super excited. She approved all of the materials and was waiting last night and I didn't get it finished. So here it is for today and we'll get it to her as well. If you need any materials to make one for you, your granddaughter, or even a niece or nephew, go ahead and look below the video in the description and we'll put links there to get to the website. If you haven't yet, hit that little subscribe button so you don't miss anything from us here at Potomac Beads. Thanks so much for watching and stay tuned for more inspirational designs.